morning, everyone, and welcome to our November 2020 customer webinar. I'm Aaron Gillette, Marketing Director at TownNews. In today's masterclass, Christine Masters, Director of BLOX CMS, will show you how to make the best use of advanced and sometimes overlooked editorial functionality within BLOX CMS. She'll show you how to drive organic traffic by writing for search engines and how using BLOX Notifier can help you grow your social media. You can type questions into the question box at any time, but we'll wait to answer them at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Christine.
Awesome, thank you so much. Again, my name is Christine Masters, and I'm the Director of BLOX CMS here at TownNews. I didn't realize ahead of time that I'm Christine Masters, and this is a master's class. I don't know if that was intentional, Aaron, but I like it.
No, I just realized that. We need to brand this thing.
Very clever, very clever. So today we're going to talk about it. In the last couple of weeks, we've actually done a couple of specific kind of advanced trainings and meetings with some of our customers, and they went really well, and there was a lot of interest from newsroom editors, from producers at broadcast companies, a bunch of these different types of places that were really interested in some of the more advanced functionality of BLOX. So we really thought it would be good to put together a little bit more, instead of a kind of a presentation the way we normally do it. I'm going to be kind of tempting the demo gods today and actually showing you some of these features in BLOX. Excited to actually walk you through some of these things. Today's webinar was actually probably twice as long as I originally planned, but because of the demo portion, it was longer, so I ended up having to cut a lot of it. So if this is something that you're interested in, please let us know. You can either reply to the marketing email that was sent to you to remind you of this webinar, or you can send an email to marketing@townnews.com and let us know if this was helpful. Let us know if there's more things in the system that you would like to have kind of this advanced training on, other kind of questions that you have, and we'll try to put together more of these types of things in the future if we get some good response on this. So the main things that we're going to be talking about today are just some comments and insights into SEO strategies and how you can write better headlines that will help you with SEO and finding and other people finding your content. We're going to walk through some of our article designer tools and show you kind of how to create a really compelling and engaging long form article, which I'm really excited about. And then I'm just going to go over a couple of our advanced workflow tools so that you can see how to add additional content to the story, how to use the BLOX Notifier tools to, as easily as possible, notify different platforms of something going online. And then we'll have some time at the end if there's any additional questions that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start off talking about some headlines for SEO and essentially how to write articles specifically for SEO purposes. The main point that I wanted to make that we see a lot of times with headlines and articles that are coming in from a print or previous broadcast process, they might include a very short headline that is made for either the print or the broadcast process. So just as an example, it might say, City Council to meet tonight. That type of an article might work really well in another product that it's not built for SEO. So one of the things that we'd really recommend is to try to, even if you have a print headline or a broadcast headline separate, for the web, try to create a specific web headline that includes as many proper nouns as possible. So this would, instead of saying City Council, say the name of the city, say Maryville City Council. If you're talking about the governor and there's a scandal going on with the governor voted for something, try to say the name of the governor and maybe even the state or where he's from. Even if it's the audience might know this already, of course, but it really helps in terms of search engine. If there's and I use the example here of a parade. If you want to say something like, tomorrow's parade is canceled, what is that parade? What's the date of the parade? Those types of things would be great to include. And then again, when you're looking at something that is a consistent piece from, for example, from week to week, like legal notices or prep sports scores or those types of things, sometimes they might have the exact same headline in print. You should definitely try to make a web version of that headline that includes additional information. For example, the date of when that specific notice is running, or you could even have legal notices : and then a quick headline about one of the, if there's a roundup or something like that, a quick headline about one of the items that's in there, just to differentiate. One of the things that search engines like is obviously being able to tell the difference between types of content, and they might actually give you a negative hit on SEO if they find that there's a lot of duplicate content on your site. To them, that is an indicator of reduced quality on the site. So anytime that you can change the names of those headlines to differentiate them is a great idea. Some additional ideas here. In terms of how your site is set up, some of these things that I'm not going to go through a demo of these particular things. So if you have additional questions about how to make any of these changes, feel free to send us a ticket in our job system and we'll help you out with that, our customer support team. But one of the things that you want to try to do in terms of your site setup is making sure that the title of individual pages is as specific as possible, has as much information as possible. On headlines for articles, that is actually used in the title of those pages, so that's why it's really important to write good headlines. But on something like the front page or the sports section, the title of the sports section actually will include like the title of that specific section and the site motto. So try to make sure that it's set up with a good motto. You can find these in the URL map or in the site tool of your site. These are in your settings panel. When you're going through all of your sections, make sure that you have keywords related to that section set up on that URL map item. So for example, on the sports section, you can have words like different types of sports, different types of teams for the area that you cover, and make sure that those are included in the description and the keywords for that particular section. And then again, making sure that when you're looking for headlines, we're going to talk about different types of headlines in a couple of slides here when we're talking about creating a story with the article designer tools. But the main headline of the page is actually used on search engines, on the title of the site, on search results inside of the site itself. So even if you might be using a hammer headline or a subhead, make sure that that headline has all of those specific proper nouns and it's really clear and precise. A couple other issues with SEO factors. These are things that, in working with Google over the last couple of years especially, Google has been really working with our customers and showing us different types of things that they like to promote that are helping with SEO. So one of the things they are really, really factoring in terms of page rank now is speed, especially on mobile. So that's something that look at your site, do a page speed analysis, which is something you can just kind of Google it and find some different tools that will do this for you. And just remember that trying to reduce the number of widgets that you have, reduce the number of external processes that are happening on the page, all of those things can really help with speed. So that's just something to weigh as you're looking at the specific factors on your site. Anytime you can reduce the amount of time it takes for the page to load, it helps with your speed. We actually have an integration with a Google product called Accelerated Mobile Pages, or AMP pages. And that's something that we can turn on your site. That actually helps your pages show up in a little strip across the top of the page in Google search results, which can help drive additional traffic. Make sure that your site is set up properly for Google News. We actually have a really good help doc in our help site. If you go to help.bloxcms.com and search for, I think if you just search for SEO, you'll find it. There's a whole page about setting up Google News and how to make sure that the name on Google News matches the name of your site so that they can kind of find each other easily. And that's something, again, to help to make sure that you're exposed properly within the Google News search results. The number one way probably to drive page rank and authority to your site is by creating a linking strategy with other sites in your community. So think about getting the local city government to link to certain pages on your site, any bloggers or message boards or forums around the area, try to have a linking strategy to get them to link to your site. Anytime other sites of authority link back to your site about specific keywords, it helps improve your page rank for those keywords. So think about other organizations and other places within your community that you can create a link strategy with those particular organizations. We also have something called canonical tags, and this is just, if you're doing any kind of syndication between sites, make sure that they support canonical tags. A canonical tag is a hint to Google that this particular article came from this other site, and it actually links back to that site and gives the page rank to that original site. It really helps reduce duplicate content, negative points. So that's something that is, if you're doing any kind of syndication between sites, is really great to make sure is supported properly and turned on. And then lastly, definitely look at Google Trends for your area and look at your referral traffic and who's coming into your site and from where. You might notice that maybe there's a message board about your local sports team, and a lot of times that message board will link to stories on your site and drive traffic. Maybe it's good to call them up and find out, is there any kind of more official relationship that you might want to have with them? Do you want to promote some of their content on your site? Maybe you want to specifically send articles to them or allow them to link to a particular page. There's all kinds of things that you can do by looking at the types of traffic in your area and what is driving traffic to your page, and then maybe you can do more things to increase that type of traffic. It's also really interesting to look at, if you have a subscription strategy on your site, look at the type of content and the type of situations, referral traffic that is driving subscriptions. What type of content is driving subscriptions, and where are those people coming from to find your site? Again, if there is a type of referral traffic that is really driving subscriptions for your site, that might be something that you can look at enhancing that relationship and trying to do more content that those type of people are interested in. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do here. Again, let us know if you have any questions about this. Hopefully these give you some ideas for ways to improve SEO on your site. So now we're going to actually talk about content creation and using some of the tools in BLOX to build really beautiful and compelling stories. So first off, and hopefully you guys are all aware of the different story presentation types that we have in BLOX. And I'm going to do a demo of this in a couple minutes. So if you aren't aware of these, then make sure to pay attention for that part. But we have three different main types of story presentations. A personality, which is very similar to a regular article, except for the information about the author is included at the very top of the page. That's great for opinion pieces or blogs that you're running on the site. Then we have a long form article, which essentially gets rid of the rails on the site and just has a very streamlined story page. This is really great for using inline content and the article designer to build a really compelling long form story. That's what I'm going to show you in a couple minutes here. And then we also have our default article set up for other types of stories. But for today's purpose, we're going to focus on the long form story type and how you can build a story presentation using the long form story type. We're also going to talk a little bit about different types of headline elements. These are included in the other tab, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. We have different types of headlines that will create this kind of headline presentation here. We have a kicker, which is at the top, a hammer headline, which is a big all caps headline. This actually will change size depending on how long or short that particular headline is. It has a minimum size and a maximum size, but it's really great for shorter headlines to create that big, bold text at the top. So that's something to definitely look into. We also have the main headline of the site, which I mentioned previously is what's used in search engines or whenever this particular asset is linked to from any other pages on the site. We have a subhead, and we also have something I'm going to show you called a cover art, which is a really interesting magazine style layout. We talked a little bit about different types of story presentation modes for articles, but I did just want to note that collections also have different types of presentations. And I would just recommend when you have time, sometime to try out different types of collections and see what types of designs that you can get. We have something called a mapped presentation, where if you have location information on each of the stories inside that collection, it will actually create a mapped presentation of that particular collection. So let's say you have 5 different articles that talk about different places that the parade went today, then you could have location information on all of those articles, maybe the pictures, for example, and then you can create a mapped presentation of all of those places. And it actually shows everything on a nice little map, and you can click on them and go between the different items in the collection. We also have a paging gallery, a series type, a timeline where it will actually map the different children of the collection onto a timeline based on their start times. So that's a really interesting one. And also a vertical gallery, which is just basically like a photo gallery, but it's all stacked on top of each other so that it's very mobile friendly and looks great on the mobile phone. So also when we talk about Article Designer, we're going to do a little bit of a walkthrough of how to add pull quotes, info boxes, things like that onto the page, how to embed them inside of the article itself, how to do inline assets, how to add a tweet or other item into the site itself. And then a new feature which came out recently, which is to be able to link inline links to other stories on your site. So I'll go over that as well. And then lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about cover art, how to create a full page magazine display on your articles, the type of art that works well, and how to make sure that, based on the size of the user's device, it's going to crop that image. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So let's get into this. So first off, talking about, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. So if you need to scoot in a little bit to look closely, feel free to do so. But this is an example of a BLOX article. And in the related tab, you can see that I have a bunch of assets that are related to this story as children. What we can do with the article designer tool is actually pull items from the side and pull them in line into the article itself. And then once it's in line, you double click on it and it gives you some additional options for how that particular article should be shown in line on that story. So for example, you can choose the alignment. If it's left, center, or right, you can choose the width. So if you choose half width and then left, it'll actually float that particular item to the left inside the story. And then each different type of child asset has different presentation modes for how they are displayed in line. So this particular item is an image. So the image itself has different types of ways that you can present that image in line. Image probably has the most inline presentation modes available. You can choose to do full bleed. You can choose a parallax image, which I'll show you an example of that in a second. You can choose the presentation of that particular asset. So if you have like a collection, for example, and you can choose the asset presentation, it'll show the collection in the same way that that collection is set to be presented. So if it's a mosaic, if it's a paging gallery, etc., that will be the way that it's shown when it's in line in the article. And then we have some other things as well. And like I said, different types of child assets will actually have different types of presentation modes. So videos have different modes that you can show, for example, a video player, or you can choose to make that just a summary link and not show the actual video player. If it's an HTML asset, you can choose to have that HTML played out and actually embedded into the content of the article itself, or you can choose to have a presentation mode that will link off to that particular HTML asset instead. So you can choose how these things are displayed in line. Another thing that I wanted to mention is our related content area. And this is something that, especially for those who work in the print area, will be very familiar with doing info boxes and things like that. When you actually create a new content item, you can choose to have these different styles that are available, and you can just create your own info box, and that info box can then be pulled in line and shown inside of the article itself. So again, you can have a bunch of different types of info boxes, a bunch of pull quotes, and then you can choose how those are displayed throughout the article. So I'm going to show you a couple of the ones that we have in this particular example, and then we'll show you what this looks like altogether. So this is an example of an article. You can see it's got the article icon here. When you open that up, you can see that this is left align. The width is default, and then the presentation is a short summary. This is an example of an image that is inline, and in this case, we have no special presentation set. This is an example of an image that is pulled inline. And then we have, all these different texts. Here's a full bleed one. Here's center half summary. So all of these are used to create the flow of the story as you scroll down the page. Let me show you one more other quick thing. In this case, I have cover art set up for this particular article. I've uploaded an image through uploading it over here. Once you upload the image, you'll see these design options show up. These don't show up until you've actually uploaded the image. But once you upload the image, you'll see design options showing up. Then you're able to set a bunch of really interesting things here. Number one, you can choose how the horizontal alignment of the headline elements show on top of the article. So in this case, we have them centered. You can choose the vertical alignment of the headline element. So in this case, we have them in the middle. So this is really going to be just in the center, horizontally and vertically inside of this photo. You can choose the color, either light or dark, for the headline element. So obviously, if you have a dark image, you can choose to have light headline elements and vice versa. And then you can choose to have a background box or text in a box. And then you can actually choose a bunch of different types of effects to be played on the image itself. You can choose to have a parallax image where the image kind of sticks to the background as you scroll down the page. My favorite, pan and zoom effect. This will actually use the image to pan and zoom as the page is shown on the user's device, which creates a really nice movement to the page. And then you can actually choose some CSS image changes, such as making it grayscale, making it like a Gaussian blur, a desaturation filter. And those things are not done through Photoshop, but just done through CSS on the page. So let me show you just very quickly what this looks like. I'm going to reload the page so you can see as it loads. You see how that there's a pan and zoom effect in the background, the image is kind of zooming in. As the page loads, you can see there's actually some, as part of cover art, will be that as the page loads, this line grows as the page is kind of coming into focus. And then this little item here that kind of gives an indication to users that they should scroll down bounces a little bit on the page. I'm going to do that one more time so you can hopefully see as the page loads. See how the thing pops out and this bounces a little bit. So it's just a really nice magazine style. One thing to note when you're looking at doing cover art is that you want to try to make sure the image itself has a lot of space so that it can handle cropping. The way that we crop things for cover art is that it's going to be full height of whatever the device of the user is, and then it will basically cut it off on the sides if necessary. This means that if somebody's looking at it on a mobile device, it's going to be a very vertical crop. And if they're looking at it on their desktop, it's going to be a very horizontal crop. And you can't really control how that particular photo is going to be viewed. It's going to be full screen no matter what type of crop you're trying to set. So I would really recommend to try to find articles or try to find photos that no matter if it's cropped vertically or horizontally, the main subject of the page is very much kind of in the center, and you have a lot of background and space that can be cropped on the outside, and that it doesn't cause a problem if they're, if you have like a portrait of a person, a lot of times you'll find that you're just going to get somebody's nose or something when you're actually looking at it on a horizontal page, and vice versa with looking at it on a mobile site. So this is something to think about when you're doing these type of big storytelling items. You might actually request a photographer to take some, background photos, or even photos that don't have a particular subject. They might just be kind of a design, a graphical, impressionistic picture of just some, maybe the outside of the school, or a close-up of a flag or something like that, that you can create a more design element structure that can be used for cover art, as opposed to some kind of a news-centered photo that has subjects in it that if they get cropped out, they might, it might look awkward. So that's something to think about as you're doing this. So as we scroll down, the first thing that I'm going to note is that this particular article, I have a bunch of things that are inline. So here's that inline story that I was talking about. Anything that's not pulled in line as part of the design of the page will still go onto the page in its normal place. Like in this case, I have photos that were not pulled in line. So they're going to create a little gallery at the top of the page. So those are just things that were not pulled in line. They'll still be showing on the article. So you don't have to necessarily put everything inside the page. But if you did put them inside the page, that gallery wouldn't be there. So if they're not going to be replicated on the page twice. So as we scroll down, we can see that we've got the short story, and it's half width, and it's floated to the left. So this is how we get this type of effect. This is a pull quote. In this case, it's a full width pull quote that's kind of in the center. So I've got another photo here. So you can see that as we embed those photos, as we embed the actual pull quotes, we've got a bunch of different types of presentations with this article. So hopefully you see a lot of fun, interesting stuff that you can do. I'm going to actually show you kind of an example here. We're going to set this to be parallax. And I'm just going to see if we can show just a really quick example of a parallax image. So again, we'll scroll down here. Here's an example of a info box that is embedded. So again, I was showing you related content. This is an info box that is shown at half width. Here's an example of a parallax image. So if we scroll up, you can see that it kind of looks like the photo is set in the background, and there's a window, and the window scrolls up the page. So it's just a really fun and interesting effect, especially with this photo where you can see him like looking up, and then, oh, he's looking at the, so that's really interesting. So now I'm going to go back into the demo here and show you a couple of additional things with workflow process. One thing that I really wanted to talk about is BLOX Notifier. BLOX Notifier is a tool that is used to push out content to a bunch of different platforms. The platforms are essentially the ones that you set up on your site. They can be push notifications to the Now app. They can be our email reach platform to send out email newsletters to customers. They can go to social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. They can do web push notifications, which is relatively a new technique over the last couple of years, where inside of the user's browser, it'll send them a notification to their browser that there's new content available and it's breaking news. So as they're looking through the web on their computer, it'll say that there's breaking news, and they can click on the little box that pops up and go to your website to read more about that. SMS text messaging, and then something called a webhook, which is the way that we can essentially notify external applications, such as Slack, for example. So all these different things can be set up in BLOX Notifier, and then you can set up specific triggers to send things out to BLOX Notifier, or you can do it manually. If you're going to set up an automatic notification, basically you set up a bunch of rules that can be used in order to send out those things automatically to those channels when those rules are met. So in this case, we have an example of a rule set over here to the side. If it is an asset that is an article, YouTube, or a collection, if it has a breaking news flag, if it's in the business or the election section, and if it has a keyword of #publish, if all of those rules are met, it will automatically send that particular article or YouTube video or collection to the channel in question. Let's say it might be on Facebook and then on Twitter. As soon as its start time is met, it will send automatically to those locations. So this is a really good way to either manually send out a notification or automatically send out a notification if certain rules are met. Now, I'm actually going to show you what this looks like inside of BLOX. So this is what the Notifier application looks like. And if you're going to try to find Notifier, it's under Community and the Notifier application here. If you don't see this on your site, feel free to submit a ticket to us and we can get this, help you get this set up on your site. This is a free application. There's no charge to use Notifier. So it's just a really great tool to add to your set of tools that you're using. In order to create a channel, this is an example of creating a new channel. And you can set up all of these different areas that I have set up here are different targets that I can use to create a channel. So that might be a specific email list, a specific Twitter account, push notification topics, etc. So once I have a channel set up that goes to these specific targets, I can come over here and set up automatic rules. And once again, those automatic rules are met, it will automatically send that item to those channels. Here's an example on this particular article of if you want to set up notifications, you can actually come into this article and create notifications that go to different channels. So in this case, let's say I'm setting it up to go to this Twitter account. I can come in here, I can change the message that is sent. By default, it's going to show you the summary or the first paragraph of that particular article, but I can change this just for Twitter, for example. So you can say, so you can ask sort of like a question, and then that can be sent to, let's say that goes to Twitter. Then if I want to send one to Facebook, here's another Facebook one, and I'm going to change this to say something else. I'm not going to think about all of them. So this will be a different message that I say to Twitter. So again, for Twitter, I have this message that shows up as part of Twitter, and for Facebook, I have this message set up that goes to Facebook. So you can have different things other than the first paragraph, and they can be set up inside of the article at the point where you're writing that particular article. Then if you wanted to have something for breaking news, you can set this as a draft and not send it out right now, and then that can be set at a later time. So let's say I want to set this out for the 25th. Then I can actually set that so that it shows up and it tweets automatically as soon as the time is met, as long as that article is live. So this way, again, this is in the other tab, and it's included on the particular article in the other tab, and you can set up those messages in advance or allow automatic rules. So we're going to talk about a couple more things, and then we're going to get to questions. So just very quickly, I would like to make sure that everyone knows about something that we have in the system called workflows. You can create workflows that do different things and manage processes for your site. For example, you might have a breaking news workflow, and in the breaking news workflow, it goes to a first read, and then a second read, and then it goes to publish on the site. You can set up workflows that have specific permissions tied to them so that certain people, like maybe your city editor, is the only one who has the permission to send something from first read to second read. And then he can do it from second read to publish. That way you can kind of control to make sure that the city editor or whoever is in charge of pushing content to the web looks through all of them, and before they're allowed to show up on the web, that person has to approve them and publish them to the site. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, and hopefully you can see this here, when you're setting up these workflow processes, there's an option that you can set on a specific step in the workflow process to say, reset the start time of this article at the point where this particular workflow is met. So for example, let's say somebody has been writing an article since yesterday, it goes through first read, it goes through second read, and then it finally goes online today at 12 p.m. You can actually have that final step reset the start time for that article so that the start time of the article reflects the time that it went live today, as opposed to the time that they started the creation process yesterday. This way you can help ensure that the start time of the asset reflects the published time, as opposed to the time that the reporter started working on it, which might be a couple days ago. So again, that's an option that's available in the workflow system. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask our customer. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about syndication hubs and just show how using syndication, if you're using our content exchange or if you have a relationship with another block site and you can, or RSS feed, you can bring those in. Let me just show you very quickly what this looks like. So essentially, this is our block site. And if I wanted to add additional content to this particular, in this case, it's just an image, but let's just pretend it's a story. If I want to add this from the syndication hub. So basically, just to make sure you saw that, you click on add and then from syndication. And then this brings up this special panel that allows you to incorporate additional content from other syndication channels. So in this case, I have a whole bunch of syndication channels set up here. I'm going to choose the TownNews Content Exchange. Then you can actually perform a search in the system. So let's say, now I have a bunch of stories that are available for me here. And I'm going to take this story and add this to the site. This gives you the opportunity to add any additional section tags or anything that you want to add. So now you can see that's starting to be added to the site. Down here, you can say that it's waiting for that asset to be imported. Let's choose another one here. Here's another one. So in this case, again, I could add keywords, I could add a section. Now at this point, you can see that these items are now imported into the site, but they have not yet been added to this particular asset. At this point, I can rearrange them and change the order of them. So let's say I have several different assets. If you wanted to go through multiple pages, down at the bottom of the page here, I can search for multiple pages and add those and then reorganize them. And at the very end, after they've all been imported, I can click add to asset. And now they show up here as child assets on that particular article. So this will work with any type of syndication channel that you want to set up, whether it's an RSS feed, whether it's our TownNews Content Exchange, whether it might be another block site. We have a whole bunch of different types of channels that are available. And when you're writing a story, you can decide as you're writing that story that you can add additional content through the content exchange or through any other syndication channel that way. So it's a really powerful tool. One other thing that I wanted to just briefly mention is just remember that we added this new functionality where you can add a link to the site. So make sure that you're using this linking functionality to do inline links, and it's a really powerful. That is it that we wanted to talk about. I'm going to hand this back over to Erin to talk about to open it up for questions.
We do have a number of questions that have come in. The first question I think is, can you talk, Christine, a little bit about how article designer tools, both article designer tools and workflows, work if you are using a blended blocks and blocks total CMS environment?
Yes. So in total CMS, before something goes to the website, we aren't, and I won't get too into the technical details of it, but we don't have access to the web templates to show what it's supposed to look like. So what we would recommend is if you're using total CMS and you want to use those article designer tools, you can do it. But if you wanted to preview what they look like, you have to first push it to the hosted site. And then at that point, you're able to preview it while it's in total CMS if you wanted to add additional tools to it. So either you can create a workflow that pushes it to the site in an unpublished state, where you can then do kind of the design portion of it, or you can choose to have it just go from total CMS up to the hosted site and then go into the hosted site to add additional functionality and kind of design it, quote unquote, for the website.
Okay. And then sort of a related question, how do you preview article articles that you've used the article designer tools on, so you've dragged in inline assets, etc. How do you preview those before publishing? The questioner is saying the preview function does not allow the images to be seen.
Yeah, I think that's the same question that is before about Total CMS. If you're building something in Total CMS, you can't preview it until it is actually as part of the hosted side. But once you push it up to the hosted side and kind of syndicate it out, then you're able to do a preview at that point. So again, if you want that to be part of your Total CMS workflow, where you want to have a preview stage in your workflow where it goes to the site in an unpublished fashion, and that way you can preview it. Or if you wanted to push it out to the site and then have a process, where you go onto the hosted site and make it quote unquote web ready.
Okay. An SEO question. What about the URL headline field? Is that useful for SEO?
Yeah, so let me show that very quickly here. On the in the other area, in miscellaneous properties, there's actually a URL title that's available here. By default, and we can look at this article, by default, the headline from the article will show up in the URL for that particular article. This isn't, what we've been told, and whether we know, nobody really knows how this stuff works, but what we have been told is that keywords in the URL are not really a factor for SEO specifically, because of the fact that it can be gamed by bad actors, and so Google doesn't necessarily look too closely at the keywords in the URL for the purposes of ranking factor. However, it definitely does help if users are sending that URL back and forth. If somebody included it in an email, they're more likely to click on that if the URL gives you some kind of hint at what that article is about. So putting the title of the article into the URL does help with usability of that particular URL. Inside of the article itself, you can actually change what the title is that is included in the URL. So that's what the URL title means here. Instead of having it say, with virus surging and restrictions tightening St. Louis, we can say something about, virus in St. Louis. And then this will, instead of using the title, it will use this more simplified title in the URL if you wanted to. Again, we don't think that that necessarily has a huge impact on SEO itself, but it definitely has to do with, it will definitely contribute to the usability of that particular URL. So if you had something where the headline is, maybe it's not a particularly useful headline and you want to add more information into the title, you can use this field. Or maybe it's too long and you wanted to kind of shorten it and simplify it. Again, you can add those words to the URL title here and it will use that instead of the title. The other thing that this is useful for is that it doesn't change as your headline changes. So you keep the same URL regardless of what the title is.
Okay, along similar lines, can you touch on the difference between a page title and a label?
So that is an interesting question. We actually have, I'm going to show you our URL map. And in the URL map, there are several different fields related to page properties related to that specific article or that specific section. So when we were talking earlier about SEO and including descriptions and keywords on particular sections, this is what I was talking about. And I would highly recommend, if you haven't done this yet, this is a great time to do it. Come in here, go through your URL map, and on any of your main sections, make sure that you have a good description. This description will be used as metadata on that particular section. And make sure you have keywords. Again, if it's a sports section, include the names of your teams, include if it's a local news area and you're covering several communities, include the name of those communities as keywords in there. And just try to include as many of those types of things as possible so that those things show up as metadata on that particular section page. For the title of the page, the title is used in the title tag of the actual section itself. And sometimes you want that title to be longer. So again, let's say it's a sports pick section. You can say the best sports in Northwest Indiana, including coverage of these topics. And so that will actually end up in the title of the page and will show up in the title when you search that in Google. But let's say that title is too long for your navigation. Then you can actually use a label here, and then that label will be a short label that can be used elsewhere to reference that section without having to have the long. And this is something, there's a good article about this in our help site. So if I think you try searching for URL label in our help.bloxcms.com. I actually have a screenshot showing kind of an ideal implementation of this, showing a longer page title, a shorter label, and then descriptions and keywords filled out. So feel free to look for additional information about that on our help site.
Okay. Are there any blocks that display the different types of headlines or tickers or hammers for the front page or section pages?
Yeah, we actually have several of our blocks will show the ability as an option to turn on headlines and subheads and things like that. So if you look at like most of our story blocks, these usually start with the word card. So like card summary or card feature. If you look under the content section of some of those named blocks, we have the ability to turn on hammer headlines and other headline types. We don't do that by default because we don't necessarily know what you're using those for, but if you want to turn those on, which I think is a great idea, you can go in and look at the content section of some of those main block types and get those turned on.
Okay. Is there a way to change the default displays of inline assets? We use a lot of info boxes, but prefer the half width right aligned.
No, that's a great idea though. Right now, there's just a default way that they show online, and if you want something other than our default, you have to go in there and change it. That is a good feature request though, to change with the default.
Do the desktop notifications work the same way as push notifications?
It is very similar to push notifications. These actually use the same technology. Instead of it's using Google's Firebase technology, and instead of going to an app, they'll go to a web notification instead. The main issue with web notifications, and I would really recommend setting up web notifications if you haven't done that already. It's a great way to, allow people to sign up for notifications on your site. And again, it's free of charge from TownNews. And if you set up the notifications, you'll get a little blurb that pops up on the page, regardless of where the user is on the web. And it will say, breaking news. You can click on it and it goes back to your site. The one main difference that, having app notifications and push notifications are great ways to reach out to your audience and to get them to come back to your site. Web notifications do not work, however, on Apple devices. So it's really important to still have an app so that you can do push notifications to Apple devices as well. So right now, web notifications do not work on Apple devices. So that's a really good reason why you still would like to have an app in the mix as well. So you can do those app notifications to Apple users. And that's just something that Apple does not currently support. Once that happens, our technology will work with that, but right now Apple does not support that.
Okay. If you fill out the summary in an asset, will the notifier automatically pull that in instead of the lead?
Correct. Yes, it will pull in the summary so that's something, again, if the reporter, as they're typing an article, or the producer, if they come in and fill out the summary area instead, then they will use that instead of the first paragraph. If you don't fill out the summary, it will use the first paragraph. If you fill out the summary, it will use that. Otherwise, it will use whatever you typed into the message here.
Okay. Can you show how to create a new channel in Notifier again?
Yes. So let's go to Notifier. So again, there is, and you go into the application settings, and then these are all the channels that you have set up. In Notifier, we have the concept of targets, and the targets are basically any type of end platforms that are set up on your site. So in order to have email lists available here, you have to be using our email list system and have those lists set up. In order to have Twitter accounts, you have to have a social account. I don't know if you can see that over here, but the social account's set up and connected over here in Notifier. But once you have those set up, you can come in here and create a new channel, and then you can choose which targets are pushed to whenever this channel is chosen or automatically chosen. So, and you can have it go to multiple places. So in this example here for breaking news, I have 2 different text messaging, 1 email, 1 Firebase push notification, 1 Twitter account, and 1 webhook. Whenever this particular channel is used, whether it's manually or automatically, all of those services will be notified. So the same message will go to all of those different services. And so again, that way you can really help save time and automate this process where you can send to Facebook, Twitter, email, push notifications, everything all at one time.
Okay. The question came in. So we can use Notifier to maintain our Twitter and Facebook accounts, to populate our Twitter and Facebook accounts?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you just set up, let's say, for example, you have a Twitter account just for sports content. You can come in here, hook up the social account for that particular sports Twitter account, and then whenever anything, I don't think I have a sports one. Yeah, whenever any thing is automatically, it's in the sports section and you have a breaking news flag or even just anything in the sports section, they'll automatically get tweeted to that specific sports account. So if you have a sports columnist, you can make sure that the Twitter account is set up for that sports columnist, and then he can go in whenever he writes a story and automatically have all of his sections go to his Twitter account or his Facebook page.
Okay. Is there a way to control the photo cropping of social media images?
No, this is a difficult thing because there's a couple of different factors that come into play when looking at social media. I'll just talk about 2 quick things, and then if again, this is something that our customer support team can help you with to get into a little bit more of the details of this. But the first one is, depending on the type of article that you're using, you can have a there's something called a Twitter card. Depending on the type of article that you're using, you can either have a large card or a small card, an image card or a story card. There's a couple different cards that Twitter uses. And so depending on the type of asset, will be different cards will be used for how those are shown on Twitter. So that's the first thing to look at, is what type of card is being used on that particular article. And then secondly, if there is no photo on that particular article, there's something called an OG image, which is used, open graph image, which is used on the page. And again, what your default image is for different sections can be set up in your page customizations. Again, you can ask our customer support team and they can help you set this up. But in terms of what happens on Twitter when that particular card is activated, whether it's a small card or a large image card, we don't have a lot of control over that. And so that's something that, you kind of just have to try to make sure that the cropping of that image will work better with how it's used on Twitter. So if it is a mugshot, for example, and you're getting that large Twitter card and you end up having a mugshot cropped awkwardly, you might want to try to add spacing to the side or something like that of that particular image so that it crops better on Twitter. Right now, we don't have a lot of the ability to impact how it shows up on Twitter. Other than
And if you need any assistance setting any of the items we've discussed up on your site, our customer support team is standing by and will be happy to help you out, Christine. So I think if you want to move to the final slide, lots of great questions. Thank you, everybody. If you do have more questions, again, our customer support team is standing by, and we have full documentation of all of these features at help.townnews.com. Our partner community is a great place to swap ideas with other TownNews customers, and that's available at community.townnews.com. You can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And we have a variety of newsletters that you can sign up for. If any of these features that we discussed today were a surprise to you, you really want to make sure you're signed up for our release notes. And to sign up for all of our newsletters, just go to townnews.com, click the news link, scroll down a little bit, and you will see a sidebar that allows you to select the newsletters you'd like to sign up for. Thank you so much, Christine, for this great masterclass. It was super informative. We'll have to come up with a better brand for this next time around. But thank you, everyone, for signing up and joining us. We will talk to you again very soon.